Hello and welcome to another episode of Mastering Dungeons. I'm Shawn Merwin here with the Holly Jolly Teos Abadia. Teos, tell me, how's it going?
It's beginning to look a lot like the time when I need to put Christmas Vacation in the DVD player and force my family to watch it.
Mm,
The kids are allergic to watching a movie more than
yet
once.
again.
Every year I make them do it. So it's
Mm.
just the gift that keeps on giving, Clark.
Has Child Protective Services been called?
No, but I did still arrive this weekend. I climbed the ladder yet again, did not kill myself. I was in the
Mm.
mall, did not die. So
That,
it's all win.
mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah. I also got mauled this weekend. Also survived, and yeah, we live to tell the tale after struggling into the capitalist center of the universe.
Ah,
Uh,
yes.
but what's not a struggle is doing this podcast and talking to everybody out there and talking to our listeners who sometimes send us missives. So we are going to talk about a couple of these missives right now. The first comes to us. I don't know Lazel asked us, you've discussed 4E skill challenges, and I was wondering what your thoughts were on the descending difficulties article that was presented by Gnome Stew. And so I love Gnome Stew, so I went off to see what this was all about. And it was an article discussing skill checks that start with very improbable or practically impossible, but then lowering as things are done to finally get to a point where the players and their characters can perform this check. It was written by former Mastering Dungeons co-host Chris Nizak, who knows a thing or two about game design. The example that Chris used was a red cap. And a red cap, if you don't know, is a fey creature that wears, of all things, a red cap. And they dip their cap in the blood of their victims, which sort of gives them some power. So Chris talked about designing an encounter where it wasn't just a red cap, but it was the red cap. And this red cap was extremely powerful. And one of the ways that the players might deal with this red cap is to remove its cap. However, removing the cap would then be a super high difficulty at first. But as the characters figure out ways to get the cap off this red cap, the DC lowers and lowers and lowers until it gets to a point where the characters actually have a good chance to remove it. And Chris goes off and describes the process of doing this, outlining the process where you think of the situation, you think of the stakes of
Hmm.
success or failure, the difficulty that it would take to do this, and then the actions that it would take to do this. And he also gives another example of stopping a magical ritual in progress before it is completed and things happen. And this this for me it was a very good overview of this sort of situation where you want to do something that is tense and dramatic but is not necessarily just combat. I have lots of things to say about this, but I'm going to hand it over to Teos first
Yeah.
to see if he has any thoughts.
Sure. I liked a lot of what this article was saying, and Chris has such neat ideas. And to me, it's the kind of thing that as a DM you want to do all the time. Like just think creatively, come up with a weird way to adjust the rules, right? And say like, well, normally a DC is X or Y, but what if I just throw it way high and then it gets reduced over time? And that's a neat idea. And I like how Chris explains the different applications, right? Doing something to a beast, a creature, a foe that can't be taken down otherwise, disabling the ritual. Those are great things, and it ties into a lot of conversations I've been having recently, where folks will say things like, "I don't know what to do to make my boss a challenge," and this can be one of those things that
Mhm.
makes it a challenge, right? Like his armor is so impenetrable, he has a force field, something. So you've got to do something else to bring it down, and this can be a possible way. However, what I've often found in play is that if my intention is for the players to have their characters do a thing round after round, whether it's try to disable the trap. 4E had this, where traps generally took 4 checks to disable, right? And the idea is you want this character to just like work at this thing. They will seldom do that unless it's really clear how awesome it is and it's tangible to them, because they will feel like, oh, well, that's not working. Or this isn't, I should just attack, because attacking is what I do. It's what the game propels me forward to doing. It's what all my character sheet seems to suggest. Because forget about that skill section. So I find it's really hard to do this, right? And so like in the adventure my son and I wrote, The Clockwork Tower, we want it to be cool to take on this device at the end. And we use a lot of techniques to reinforce that you are making progress, so that it's evocative and continues to pull you in to do more to this machine. Because otherwise, everybody just attacks the obvious foe, and it's only a combat, no kind of things. I'll stop there. What were you going to say, Shawn?
No, I was going to say exactly what you said. I have attempted these sorts of encounters hundreds of times over many editions of D&D, and having run them, having written them poorly, having run them poorly, having designed them what I think is great, and running them how I think they should be run, and still having them go poorly, has taught me that it is a very, very subtle and situational exercise to do these things. Yeah. As you say, and as our experiences with hundreds, if not thousands of players over the years has spelled out, is people want to do the best thing. They want to optimize their turn. And most players understand what their characters do well. They understand that their best use of the bonus action for the fighter is to take the extra attack. Their best option for the rogue's bonus action is to hide. Their best attack action is to do this. Their best reaction is to do this. And so if you set up an alternative sort of encounter like this, they are loath to do anything that costs them an action.
Yeah.
The only way, as you said, Teos, to get them to do these things is to explain it. And not only explain it, but explain it in such gory, mechanical detail that they will then understand, oh, so my optimal choice because of this situation is to use my action to do an athletics check as opposed to an attack. By the time that you explain it to the point where most players actually grok what's going on, you step so far outside of the story that it becomes inorganic. You want this to be exciting and fun and quick, and you want them to understand that the red cap's hat makes it super powerful. And if you get that hat off, it will be a much easier fight. Unless you spell it out to the point where the characters understand that they cannot win unless they attack, they're just going to keep attacking.
Yeah.
Especially if the DC is 30 and the first player says, well, I have a plus 12 to my athletics check. I'm just going to wrestle that off. Roll. Okay, I'm plus 12. I rolled a 17. That's a 29. And you say you fail. No matter how much you've explained, that's going to feel bad. And people are going to well, I'm not going to try that again. So if you say, but each time you try it, if the DC goes down, they don't care.
I agree.
And so it takes a game that already has a problem with the switch between mechanics and story and makes that even worse.
Yeah.
And to do it really well, then as Chris says, go ahead.
Yeah. So with that example with the red cap, I think that there's a real difference. And this is the kind of thing that I love doing as DM, is seeing these comparatives, right? That if you say mid combat, the hat looks like it's the source of all its power, and someone tries to get it and they fail, and you go, you couldn't get it. It seems like maybe it magically is tied to his head, but it's perhaps a little looser or something like that. It might be a little easier next time. No. But if way back before we get
Yeah.
to this fight, we have them, meet the hag who in exchange for something says, the key to defeating this red cap is to remove its hat, but it is no simple task. You will have to have the patience of the, whatever creature. Only then, right? Then they know, my goal is work at this till we succeed. And they come in with that, then it will work, right? But if you try to do it
and then
mid-combat,
and you literally and you literally then have to go through the steps that they will need to take with the hag. First, says the hag, you must sever the magical connection between the creature and its hat.
Yeah.
This will require knowledge of magic plus siphoning your spells into a check or something.
Yeah.
Then, not only that, it is physically connected via several locks, and you must unlock the lock. Okay, we're going to need to do a sleight of hand, thieves' tools check.
But
only then can
And now this goes right back to the question, which is this is now a skill challenge, like 4th edition did, right?
Right. Yeah. So it's super fun with the right group and the right game master and the right situation. And if you hit everything pinpoint perfect in terms of actions that it takes and all of that, then it could be super fun.
Yeah.
And so Chris is showing us the tip of the iceberg with this.
Yeah.
And more and more and more could be, as we've done, described to make it really sing.
Yeah.
And even if you get it absolutely perfect, you're still going to have players out there who just want to use their actions and bonus actions and reactions and movement to do the most damage because that's what they built their characters to do.
Yeah.
So even then, sometimes you're lost as a designer.
Yeah.
But at least this gives us a starting point to discuss these sorts of things.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'll give one last example, which is that, and it's funny how some designers see these problems from the very beginning. I remember at the very beginning of 4th edition, there was a trap in one of the early Living Forgotten Realms adventures that was, I think it was 2 crossbow traps firing at you. And the intention of 4E was 4 checks would disable it because the idea was 4 attacks take down a monster, 4 rounds of doing stuff. And so the intention was, a character will spend 4 rounds. But what they did was when you succeeded on the first check, the turrets slowed down their rate of fire or something like that. And it was tangible immediately, right? Second check, one of them turned off.
Right.
Third check, the other one was at big penalties. And then the 4th check, they were both disabled. So each time it was a measurable, and they did a lot of damage, right? So you could, the rogue or whoever decided to interact with these things was like, I am doing something every time. And that was tangible. And that was, I copied from that from then on because, if you did it otherwise, it was foolish. And a lot of encounters that were otherwise, people would just ignore the trap until the combat is done. And then often what the DM would do, and so players learned off of this, is the DM would just hand wave disabling the trap. Well, you killed all the monsters, you're going to disable the trap. So the trap would no longer attack them, even though technically it should still be firing, we should all still be in combat. And then players really learn, ignore the trap, the DM will hand wave it. And that's...
Right. Yep. So that's why those, understanding the stakes, getting the stakes right and the situation right is also just as important as the difficulty class and the actions for steps. So thank you to Lazel for pointing us to that story. Always a big fan of everybody there at Gnome Stew. And the other question we got this week was from Shadowmain via our Patreon Discord saying, after game sessions, I've heard one player not happy with another player at the table. For example, they're hogging the spotlight, they're talking over me, etc. I haven't noticed this, although I'm paying attention to giving each player time. How can I tell when a player is frustrated? Teos, got any words of wisdom, any gems?
Well, there was some really good conversations about this, and one of them that I kind of side with was just sort of that you often can't. So you try to, but you're doing a lot of things, so it can be hard to miss these cues. The other thing is that it may be that sometimes this is like really true, right? And so we can, if we really wake ourselves up to it, yeah, we notice this player keeps interrupting the other, right? But it might be that the player feels interrupted. We don't feel like it's really an interruption. So you don't always know. And you can't always be aware of everything. So how do we tell if a player is frustrated? We often have to check in with our players and just say, how are things going periodically, right? And just, I like doing surveys every now and then. So I'll just do a Google form. There are often things I want to know about the campaign itself, like are the factions resonating? Are the combats too hard or are they exciting enough? Those kinds of questions. And then I kind of say also, like, is there anything that else you want to share with me? Anything that would make play more fun, and any issues with how gameplay is at the table? And that's where they can say, I feel like I'm always talked over. Then we can address that. What do you think, Shawn?
Yeah. No, that's absolutely the case. People hesitate to DM for a lot of reasons, or they feel challenged when they DM for a lot of reasons. And a lot of advice we always talk about, knowing the rules and how, or being an entertaining DM, doing voices. We don't think about the social aspect of it as much as we should. And we've talked here before about DMs being like a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the same skills or processes in teaching you use in DMing. And another one is sort of like project manager or uh, like meeting facilitator. So if you have to do that in your job, if you have to have people meet and discuss things and you sort of lead the meeting, and then after the meeting, you might send out something saying, hey, how'd the meeting go? Is there anything we missed?
Right.
Anything we could do better? It's the exact same thing. Like you say, Teos, surveys,
Mm-hmm.
just an open invitation and a personal email to each of your players the day after the session saying, hey, how's it going? Anything change? Is a huge deal. And they're more likely to be, a one-on-one answer will likely be more honest than asking everyone
Yeah.
where everyone else can see. So
Yeah.
it's just social.
Yeah, it is social, and it can be hard to address them, right? Because then the second step, one is being aware of it, and two is addressing it. And depending on sort of how you interpret it, you can reach out to one or both
Mhm.
parties, right? So it might be that you go, yeah, actually, when I think about it, that person really is often cutting them off. So I might say, hey, I want you to be a little careful around cutting other people off, and make sure that I know your character is this, that, and the other, but make sure that other people can finish what they're doing. And I will
Mhm.
do things like, if someone's talking to an NPC and then someone else says something, and this happens a lot in play, especially at conventions, where the NPC, you say something, player one starts saying something, player two takes that idea and jumps off of it to really kind of like steal the concept. And I'll have the NPC listen and then
Mhm.
say, I really like what you're both saying. And I'll turn to the person that originated it and say, tell me more about what you're thinking. Right. So I give the spotlight
Mhm.
back to them
Right.
deliberately because they started it, right? They called it. The other person jumped off of it, and I
Yeah.
appreciate their enthusiasm, but I want to make sure that other person gets recognized because they were the first one,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, and like Teos just did, there are subtle ways to get this across. The one thing that if you can do it is not to say, "Hey Jane, Jill
Hmm.
thinks you're talking over her."
Yeah.
You say, "Jane, I've noticed that there are times when other people are talking, and your enthusiasm, while great,
Hmm.
tends to overwhelm them." And that so right, if you take that onto yourself, it's less likely to cause friction between the players, and then you can again become the conduit for not just the gameplay but for the social
Yeah.
play as
Totally. Totally. Hmm.
So I hope that answered that question. Thank you both Shadowmane and Lazelle for those questions. And if you have questions, you can hit us up via all the ways, via our Patreon, Discord, Twitter, Blue Sky. What am I forgetting? Mastodon,
Mastodon,
YouTube,
yeah, Patreon webpage, the
all the above.
Discord, all of it.
Yep. And now we're going to get to our news and commentary section, starting with a little tiny crowd-funded game that launched a couple of days ago. MCDM's crowdfunding their game via backer kit.
Mm-hmm.
And within the first 24 hours, did it raise 100,000? No. 200? No. $500,000? No. $1 million? No. 1.5 million? No. All the way up to $2 million within the first 24 hours. And as we record this, it's flirting with $3 million, and it still has over 3 weeks to go. So congratulations, MCDM. Congratulations, James Tricasso, Matt Colville, and all of the folks there who worked on this game and who will be working on this game for the next 18 months because it is not something that's ready to go out right now. This is really being funded via crowdfunder as opposed to just being a pre-sale use.
Which is remarkable.
Here,
well, I mean, that part is remarkable. That I mean, I think in a lot of ways, early Kickstarters were reflecting the concept of Kickstarter, which was you have an idea, get the money to make it happen. And then everybody was disappointed when, you know, the project wouldn't show up for years, or it would get canceled, or it would not end up being what you wanted it to be. And so it became the like, finish your project, tell people, give people a sample, and say, hey, this thing's going to ship on this date once I, you know, finish the last little tiny bits. That became the way to do it. And MCDM's like, no, we're crowdfunding now for 18 months from now. And in Q2, we're going to give you, you know, something that will be playable. That's our target. But, you know, all dates can slip and the game could end up being different and all of that. So that's interesting to me that did not limit, clearly has not seemed to limit who backs it. And the other part is they have chosen to be very transparent about the process and to stay engaged throughout the development process. And typically what happens is people hide, right? You go to your bunkers and you design your RPG and it's quiet time. And then you say, we have an RPG. And MCDM has chosen to share every bit of the process, even when it's things like, you know, I worked on a system with them and it ended up not being like it was too big, you know? And so they were like, okay, we're not going to go with this approach. And then Matt tried it and it didn't work for Matt. And so who knows what it'll end up being, right? And they share all those warts of the process. And that has not dissuaded people from wanting to back it. It's perhaps even been more attractive. And I think that's perhaps a lesson for the industry that it is a possible approach. It's risky, but it's an interesting approach.
Well, it's a possible approach to you if your main vehicle for bringing people in was that.
Yeah,
right.
True.
That's been Matt's whole thing.
Yeah.
And so it's totally reasonable to do that. Is it reasonable for every company to do that? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
If other companies tried to do that, they would, just the opposite would happen. People would quit, people would stop, because that's not the way that things get done. Not just in the game industry, but in general.
Yeah.
Not to say that you shouldn't seek feedback and do things like that, but with processes, there's, as you said, there's different ways you can do it. And MCDM is in that position where Matt is right out there. Their fans love that, and so they're going to get that. But to have people say every company should do this, or look at, they're so honest. And other companies are dishonest. That's just not the case.
Yeah, no,
that's just not the case. And I'm glad that it works like that for them, because it's fun, it's entertaining, it's its own little show, it's its own little byproduct, if you will, of being a backer. So and that's great, that's great. But not for everybody. But as long as Matt can make that work, and James is, the little engine that could in the background, keeping the wheels going.
I like that
Yeah,
engine.
they're going to do just fine, and
Yeah.
it's going to be a good game.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
going to be a good game. I already know it will be.
And it is fun, they've got the up for offering is the Heroes book, so it's the player book, it's the Monsters book. At this time, they are not envisioning a DM book. And then the two books are also available in a deluxe version called the Ajax edition, which I think they sold out of it. And then they said, okay, we're making a wave 2, but we've checked with our distributor and we can't make a wave 3. So, if you want it, you got to get it. So, I mean, which is something, right? When you make a deluxe version and you're like, sorry, we can't give you more of these, even though this is highly profitable for us. We can't get a printer that will make you more. So that's a wonderful problem to have, right?
Yeah, yeah. And speaking of things that are in process and upgrading, Roll20 is overhauling its virtual tabletop. They are calling it Jumpgate, and they announced that they are going to modernize their virtual tabletop. They're going right down into the very depths of their code to update the platform. Rendering engines, web components, everything will be updated to be faster and allow for features to be updated more quickly. Thoughts on that, Teos?
I mean, I can't help but say that this is a reaction to the virtual tabletop from Wizards of the Coast, and maybe even just the maps. Because that's something that's being done with fairly new technology, and therefore it's easy to add features for Wizards. So, sometimes innovation breeds more innovation, and that can be good for everybody. I think this is great. Roll20 has felt like a virtual tabletop that, while they've been working hard, clearly they're making enhancements all the time. It's felt like it had this old part of the engine that was just making it hard to tack on improvements. And so going back and modernizing it from the very inside, that's a difficult thing to do tech-wise, but I think it is the right thing to do. They said, we want to make sure so that everything from a potato to the latest gaming PC can smoothly play a game on Roll20. And I laugh, but also this is very important because I've had situations where, like, I ran D&D through the Baldwin Games virtual games for folks in Spanish, and people who were in Latin America would say, I can only run things off my phone, and it's not that new a phone. And so even Roll20, it's hard for me to roll. I'm just going to drop from the game. I'm not going to play. So having that ability to run off of almost anything, that's a real advantage. And it's something that I worry about with the D&D virtual tabletop, that it'll not be easy enough for just anybody around the world to play. And most of the world doesn't tend to own a desktop computer. The phone has really replaced a lot of things. And so, like, when my daughter went to Japan, nobody had desktop computers unless you were in an office working. No kid at school had a home computer for use for things like this. So I think if they want to go global, which Roll20 does have a big international base, this is really smart.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like you said, I think the virtual tabletop that Wizards is previewing did that. And I think Maps did that, right? I think Maps was I think it shocked not just players, I think it shocked the industry to say, wait a second, we're waiting for this big grand virtual tabletop. If they're going to also publish this very slimmed down version that's really easy to use and looks like it's free if you have
subscription,
normal access to a normal subscription to D&D Beyond, that's a game changer. So I'm glad this is happening. I think it's a necessary step. The people who I've talked to sort of on the inside of the OBS and Roll20 team knew this had to happen, and wished it could have happened sooner. But now we will see. Now it's the hard part, right? The hard part is making it work, and making it work to the expectations of a community that are soon going to have a lot of different options. Whereas before, Roll20 was it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yes, there were other ones, yes, but this was sort of the standard and everyone was
Yeah.
using it. So you had that access of, no, that's what my DM's using, so I have to use it. And so I learned it, so now I use it. That's going to change.
Yeah.
We'll
And you
see
have
how
to,
it goes, and
yeah, you have to maintain that competitive advantage, especially when you see someone enter the space that already has a locked customer base through D&D Beyond. Um, because like on the virtual weekends through Baldman Games, Roll20 is by far the most common platform. You see games in Fantasy Ground, you see games just run on Discord and a few other places, but it really is Roll20 being the number one game engine for virtual tabletops, and so you want to keep on to that, and that you go further and further down the road where you're struggling with what your code is built on. And so yeah, great.
all right, we will keep an eye on everything happening there. And if you have any thoughts, you know where to find us. We have, speaking of virtual tabletops, now seen reports from PAX Unplugged about people who got a chance to try the virtual tabletop. What has the overall tenor been? The overall tenor has been really, really positive. And not only has it been positive, but it's been positive from sources that are really WotC detractors who are begrudgingly admitting that they went in hoping to come back with a report that it was terrible and that nothing had changed.
Yeah.
And they were like, this is really good. So Teos, what have you read?
I mean, that made me laugh a lot, just to see folks were just, their thumbnails are, screaming faces, and the titles are things like, has Wizards, is Hasbro going bankrupt? Is Wizards dead? What will happen after, what will rise from the ashes of dead D&D? And then they're like, this was an amazing experience. We had so much fun. The virtual tabletop is incredible. So that was amazing. But so good job, marketing team, apparently. But also, it looks like they've added a number of features since April, and that's what I was really curious about, because in April, when they did the at the summit, they had folks use it, and then there was a small playtest group that came, or one or two playtest groups that sort of shared experiences after that, and it sounded like it was just the same as what we'd seen in April. So now, many months later, have there been improvements? And the answer was yes. One of the reviewers, playtesters, called it Digital Dwarven Forge, where you can pick building blocks such as a wall, a door, a tree, and you can kind of menu through them and pick that block and just put it down. And you can put it again and again like you would with a paintbrush program. So you can very easily sort of, paint a row of walls or drop in doors. That's really cool. You could not do anything like that in April. It was all just solid pre-made, buildings and things like that. It does sound like a lot of the content now comes from within D&D Beyond for sure. So the first step is you've got to be in D&D Beyond with your character, with your monsters, with all of that being in there, and then you're bringing those elements over. So as much as there was talk recently from Wizards of, yeah, it'd be great if, the virtual tabletop was used for other RPGs, the reality is we should not expect any support there, right? Because they're not going to add freely games into D&D Beyond, and we're not going to see Pathfinder in D&D Beyond. But if your game uses polyhedrals and you're okay with having, the minis and the maps that are in the virtual tabletop, sure, you could use that. But it's not something where we should expect this sort of active support.
So if you had the chance to check out the VTT at any point, let us know what you thought. In the meantime, Midwest Game Fest was going on, and there were several online seminars. One of them I got a chance to sit on. The Evolution of 5e panel was hosted by Zach Goins, and we had Rich Lescouflair, Alan Tucker, David Friant of Nerdarchy, Alphinius Goo of Gooey Games along to chat about where we've seen 5e changing since its release about 10 years ago, and what we think might be coming forward. It was fun. It was a great panel. They have a whole bunch of other panels as well available on Twitch. Some I think were being moved to YouTube. So if you just search on Midwest Game Fest, you can see panels. I know that Andrew Basinski hosted one about Star Trek Adventures
Cool.
with some of the Star Trek Adventure designers. So it wasn't just D&D, it was all sorts of role-playing games. And you can find it on Twitch by following the link in our show notes.
Fantastic.
How about some creator and crowdfunding news, Teos? What you got for us?
Well, the first thing I noted was an awesome blog from Scott Fitzgerald Gray, friend of the show. He talked about foundations of fast prep. And this was a reaction to something MT Black had asked about, which he'd I think I forgot on which platform, Blue Sky or something, he'd said, what's the formula for a low prep, highly enjoyable 2-hour adventure? And Scott just spits out, map of old ruins, 5 rooms or so, 2 cool traps of hazards, one of them placed conspicuously at the entrance, 2 easy encounters, and then this is the one that really caught my eye. 1 incorporeal or teleporting hard encounter stalks the characters, then attacks just after the second easy fight finishes. And I thought, what? But Scott knows his stuff, and he goes on to explain how to make this work. And there's a lot of deliberate, I mean, I really check out on missives from mooncastle.blogspot.com how he explains all these different pieces and why they work so well as just a go-to 2-hour adventure sequence. Things like the first trap, by being obvious, teaches the players to engage and be cautious and rewards them for interacting with things. Right? Brilliant. And then this villain that is incorporeal or somehow inaccessible but shows its face early on becomes now a known entity, right? Instead of getting to the end and there's some cultist that we've never seen before doing the ritual and you got to stop them, you have seen this person before, right? So the eventual confrontation feels desirable and like a release valve, right? Like, now we can take you on, right? And also because it piggybacks onto that easy fight, it makes this a challenging encounter because you haven't recovered from it. So really some neat thoughts here, and I fully enjoyed this. This was a great read.
Yeah, I mean, Scott is right on with this. And the advice in here, when we discuss the next part of the adventure later on in this episode, we'll actually come back to some of the things that Scott mentions here when we talk about that adventure. The last bit of creator news is that you can get $10 off Monty Cook Games, and that money goes to the RPG Creators Relief Fund. So every year, Monty Cook Games chooses a charity. This year, it is that RPG Creators Relief Fund. Monty Cook Games will give you a $10 coupon code. Go to the site, buy what you're going to buy, use that coupon code, and you will be giving not only money to Monty Cook Games for their great products, but also $10 going to that relief fund.
And I
What
believe you
does
can
the relief
even
fund cover, Teos?
Yeah, and I think you can even go just cash in the code and give the relief fund $10 because they get 100% at $10. It's not proceeds. Okay. It's not anything like that. They get all of it. But then you can also get a $5 item or whatever, and now it's yours, and you just give that amount to the relief fund. So the relief fund helps creators who fall in hard times, because this is a huge problem in our industry, right? Folks who have any number of illnesses, calamities that happen, unexpected accidents, things like that, and they can appeal to the creators relief fund, and the relief fund helps them get through that problem. So this is a very good benefit to the industry as a whole when you give money to this organization.
So you can check that out at montycookgames.com and look for the charity gift link. And a little bit of extra news that just dropped as we finished recording. D&D Adventurers League has announced the 50th anniversary Dungeons & Dragons special event at GaryCon. It is called Legacy of Worlds, and Teos is going to tell us all about it.
Yeah, so Legacy Worlds looks like it is a weekly epic streaming show that will take well-known characters to well-known worlds from D&D's history. And the cast of players will be Devin Wilson as the Tomekeeper. Then we have Luke Gygax playing Melf, Ed Greenwood playing Elminster, of course, Merrick's DeCanneth by Keith Baker, Vladeska Drakov played by Lisa Teague, Loholt Linvender by Tommy Gofton, and many other famous guests, B. Zelda, Deborah Ann Wall, Stod Swashwick, and others. And the idea is that this stream's going to give us kind of a 50th year retrospective, it sounds like. And to tie into it, there is an epic adventure called Proxy Hunt, written by the D&D admins Greg Marks and Tony Winslow Brill, the AL admins, and then also with Tommy Gofton. And this will pick up the pieces of in the city of Sigil, where Legacy of Worlds, the stream, ends. And the legendary heroes are in need of an army of adventurers from their home worlds to help search for a missing person. And the kind of fun thing of this in terms of Adventures League play is you can bring, for the first time ever, characters from any of the storylines. So you can bring your Dragonlance character, your Ravenloft character, your Eberron character, your Forgotten Realms character, any of these, out of Spelljammer, out of any of these campaigns, and it's all legal for you to bring those characters because you're coming to Sigil and you want to save the multiverse. There is an emphasis on problem solving over grinding combat, all pillars of play. During the epic, several special guests will play surprise roles. There will be special prizes. And later, the epic will be available on the DM's Guild and have rules for solo table play. So you don't have to be at GaryCon to participate. And it's a 4-hour event for levels 8 to 13, it sounds like.
Yeah, so it is there, and it will be available for you after GaryCon. So if you're at GaryCon, you get a chance to play in the premiere and participate in the full epic. And then afterwards, you can play at a single table if you choose, or maybe at an epic at your local convention. So
and it looks like,
thank you, Teos, for recognizing that news.
Yeah, and it sounds like this may be kind of helping to, because it's called 50th. The title of it is Celebrate Dungeons and Dragons 50th Adventures League. Looks like this may launch sort of the Dungeons and Dragons 50th event for the Adventures League, so we can see it maybe starting at GaryCon and going for a year. It's pretty cool.